Okay, guys. So today we're going to be talking about natural selection. It's in the same vein of evolution. This really explains how evolution happens because nature selects or chooses which animals or organisms will live and which ones will not live and be able to pass on their genes to their offspring. So we just watched the video of the squirrel and the snake. And at first glance, or when somebody may ask you like which animal, a squirrel or snake, is more fit, right? Most of you guys I'm sure would say the snake, right? The snake is typically stronger, typically bigger, can probably eat a squirrel, right? Same thing if we were looking at humans, right? If I said that, okay, Mr. Barry and Arnold Schwarzenegger are going to be in a competition, who will win? Most people would say Arnold Schwarzenegger. But when we're looking at nature or the environment is what we have to think about when we're thinking about fitness, right? Who's more fit between Mr. Barry and Arnold Schwarzenegger? Once again, most of you guys would probably say Arnold Schwarzenegger. But if I said that we were having a teaching competition, Mr. Barry would obviously be more fit to win that competition because that is my natural environment. So I would be chosen to win. I'd be more fit there. Same thing with the snake and the squirrel. The squirrel was more fit than the snake in that particular instance, and therefore he survived and now is able to reproduce and pass on his offspring. Versus the snake, he cannot do that. He's actually dead. So therefore he cannot pass on his offspring. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start on our notes though. This is the page that you should be on your OneNote. Make sure you minimize and kind of half screen it. Kind of like this, half screen my video, and then your notes are over here. You'll half screen those as well. Okay? I'm going to be in full screen, obviously. So let's begin. So from mutations to evolution, you guys remember, nobody is exactly like anyone else. If you look around this room, you see similarities between people, right? But no two people look exactly alike. We're all just a little different, and we know that happens because of these things called mutations, which are sometimes random and sometimes cause, they're actually always random, right? But we know that there are three types. There are insertions, there are deletions, and then there are substitutions. At any rate, you have bunnies. All bunnies are related, but you also know there are different color bunnies. As we can see here, we have a white bunny right here, and then we also have a black bunny over here. Those fur colors happen because of a mutation, okay? Something that's random. All right, so we have these two bunnies. Let's look at this environment or this nature down here. This is obviously the snow. Snow is white. If I were a predator, okay, who would I be able to see more easily on this white snow? The white bunny or the black bunny? Well, obviously, yeah, if I were a predator, I'd be able to see the black bunny. So I'm going to eat him before I eat him over here. And that's because I can see him better. Right? And so if I'm eating him, that means he's not living to pass on his genes, whereas the white rabbit is. So the white bunnies can survive and the black bunnies cannot pass on their DNA because they die. So therefore white bunnies can reproduce. And so you say, well, that's how it happens? Yeah, basically nature has chosen that the white bunny is more fit to live here than the black bunny. Now, if we were in a forest or something like that, then maybe the black bunny would survive over the white bunny if we were like in a forest or something that was not white. So in a snowy environment, only white bunnies will survive and pass on their white fur DNA. Obviously, this bunny is white, so the chances of him having white babies is really high. Over a long period of time, we're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, the entire population of bunnies will become white. The population of white bunnies survive and they adapt better. So natural selection is survival of the fittest. Remember, being the fittest does not mean being the strongest. Being the fittest means that you are able to survive or adapt in an environment and then therefore reproduce and pass on your genes or DNA. All right? Only the fit can survive and pass on their genes, which is to reproduce. Remember, evolution and natural selection affects a population, not an individual. This cannot happen with just one thing. Okay, so which bunny will survive from predators? We obviously know the white bunny will survive here. Okay, not this color. Okay, so how do you determine who survives, right? We really don't determine, nature does. So how does nature determine? Well, animals have different adaptations. So if you use that word before, you can say, what's an adaptation? Adaptations are traits that help organisms survive in an environment. What I mean by that is that a trait, we all know that traits are determined by our DNA, right? And those are our characteristics. So adaptations are characteristics that help organisms survive. It can only be an adaptation if it's helping the organism, right? If it's hurting the organism, then it's not an adaptation, right? That's not a good thing. Adaptations are good, okay? So we're going to talk about that in a second. And just always remember, environment is the habitat where an animal lives, right? Right now, your environment is Sharpstown High School, more specifically, Mr. Berry's classroom. If this is where you're watching the video, right? If you're watching it in some other place, that is your environment, okay? So let's look at these birds and their adaptations. Which bird is best fit for this environment, right? I want you just to look and think for just a second, okay? Obviously, looking here, if the kiwi bird lived in an area or in trees where walnuts grew, he would have a really hard time because of his beak shape. He does not have the right adaptation to eat this food, so therefore he will probably die in this type of environment. Eagles, possibly with this beak shape, but definitely not the woodpecker. He would not be able to crack open the hard exterior. The parrot would be the best bet. He'd be best fit for this environment. He has a nice strong beak to crack open the walnuts. That's something that these birds here don't have. The eagle is more so have a pointed beak, which is good for catching things like fish and eating things of that nature, snakes as well. All right. What about here? What bird is best fit for this environment? Looking at the picture. I'll give you 5 seconds to think. If you guess the woodpecker, then you're correct. Obviously, by the holes, we can see that's the woodpecker. But we also know that the woodpecker has to have that beak to chisel away at the wood. This beak is much too narrow and will probably break off. The parrot, as we already have seen, not really good at pecking, and neither is the eagle. So what about this flower right here? Which bird would be best fit to live in this environment and to get nectar from deep inside of this flower? I'm going to give you 5 seconds to think. If you guessed the kiwi, then you are correct. Its long, narrow beak can reach way down, and so if this is the environment that these birds lived in, the kiwi would most likely live over these right here, these other birds, because of its adaptation. And adaptation is a good thing. It's something that helps an animal survive. All right, so this is where we're going to go ahead and stop. Okay, once you get to this part of the video, if you have any questions or any notes that you missed, if there's time left, you can scroll back and get that. Otherwise, we're going to stop now and start our checks for understanding.